You have never hurt anyone. You would never hurt anyone. That is what you believe about yourself right now, reading this. But the real answer is far stranger. Under the right conditions, in the right room, wearing the right uniform, you might. In August 1971, a psychologist at Stanford University wanted to know something simple. Are cruel people cruel because of who they are or because of where they are placed? His name was Philip Zimbardo. He built a fake prison in the basement of the psychology building. He recruited 24 ordinary young men, healthy, stable, no history of violence. He flipped a coin. Half became guards, half became prisoners. The guards were given mirrored sunglasses so their eyes couldn't be seen. They were given wooden batons. They were given uniforms. No training, no script. Just one instruction. Maintain order. What happened next was supposed to take 2 weeks. It was stopped after 6 days. Why? Because the guards did not need to be told to be cruel. It came on its own, faster than anyone predicted. They forced prisoners to do push-ups. They took away mattresses. They used solitary confinement as punishment for backtalk. One guard began speaking in a southern accent, modeled after a character from a prison movie, because that is what a guard was supposed to sound like. He didn't decide to become cruel. He slipped into a role that already existed, waiting for him, like a costume left on a chair. The prisoners changed too. Real names disappeared. They were called only by their assigned numbers. Within days, several were having breakdowns. One was released early after uncontrollable crying and rage, only 36 hours in. He wasn't acting. His body had started responding to the role as if it were real, because to his nervous system, it was real. Here is the part that should unsettle you. Zimbardo himself stopped being a neutral scientist. He started calling himself the prison superintendent. He was thinking about visiting hours and security, not psychological safety. It took another researcher, Christina Maslach, walking in and seeing the prisoners shuffling in chains to break the spell. She told him this was not an experiment anymore. It was suffering. That single outside perspective is what ended it. Does this mean humans are secretly monsters, one uniform away from becoming guards? Not exactly. It means something quieter and more uncomfortable. Your sense of self is not as fixed as it feels. It bends around the situation you're placed in. You can see the earlier proof of this a decade before Zimbardo's basement. Stanley Milgram, a psychologist at Yale, ran a study where ordinary volunteers were told to deliver what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to a stranger simply because a man in a lab coat told them to continue. Most of them did. Not because they were sadists, because authority, context, and a sense of assigned role are more powerful than most people ever admit to themselves. Think about what a role actually does to a person. A role tells you what is expected. A role removes the burden of deciding for yourself. A role gives you permission. And permission, it turns out, is one of the most dangerous things a human mind can be handed. Consider your own life for a second. Not a prison, not a lab, just an ordinary Tuesday. Have you ever noticed yourself speaking differently at work than you do at home? Sharper, colder, more willing to enforce a rule you don't personally believe in simply because the badge, the title, the uniform told you that was the job? That is the same mechanism. Smaller, quieter, but the same. Evolution built you this way for a reason. For most of human history, survival depended on group cohesion, not individual conscience. A person who followed the tribe's hierarchy, who slipped into whatever role kept the group functioning, was more likely to survive than a person who constantly questioned authority. Obedience to structure was not a flaw. It was a survival strategy passed down through hundreds of thousands of years, long before anyone built a psychology department or a basement prison. That is the twist most people miss. The guards in Zimbardo's basement were not unusually bad men. They were unusually ordinary men, placed inside a system engineered, even accidentally, to reward dominance and punish empathy. Change the system, and you change the behavior it produces. This is why the same soldier can be gentle with his own children and brutal in a war zone. The person did not change. The role did. Modern researchers have spent decades revisiting Zimbardo's data, and some have raised real questions about how much guards were coached, rather than acting spontaneously. Science self-corrects that way, and it should. But the deeper pattern the study pointed to, that ordinary people conform startlingly fast to the expectations of an assigned role, has shown up again and again in other research since, in workplaces, in institutions, in war zones documented by historians long after Stanford. So why does this matter to you on an ordinary day, far from any basement prison? Because you are inside systems right now that you didn't design and rarely question. A workplace with its own hierarchy. A group chat with its own unspoken rules about who gets mocked. A family with its own roles assigned before you were old enough to choose them. Each one is quietly asking you to become a certain version of yourself. Most days, you say yes without noticing you were asked. The uncomfortable gift of Zimbardo's basement is this. Cruelty is rarely a monster hiding inside a person waiting to be unleashed. It's usually an ordinary person, handed a costume, standing in a room designed to reward the wrong instinct. And kindness works the exact same way. Put a person in a room built to reward patience, humility, and care, and watch how quickly they rise to that role instead. You are not fixed. You are not a finished character playing out a script that was written the day you were born. You are, more than you'd like to admit, a product of the rooms you keep walking into. So the next time you feel yourself sharpening into someone slightly colder than you meant to be, slightly more willing to enforce than to understand, ask yourself the only question that actually matters. Not whether you're a good person, but what room you're standing in and whether it's asking you to become someone you wouldn't choose to be on your own. You have never hurt anyone. You would never hurt anyone. That is what you believe about yourself right now. The real answer is far stranger. It was never really about you at all. It was about the room.